She didn't stop responding because you messed up a comma in your last text. She didn't pull away because you were too nice or too intense. That's just too superficial. The truth, which no one has told you, is that the loss of interest rarely happens explicitly. She doesn't scream, she doesn't declare, she doesn't break dishes, she just starts to disappear. And in this silent disappearance, she expects one thing: that you lose yourself trying to get her back. Because then, yes, the cycle is complete. A woman doesn't turn off the moment you make a mistake. She turns off the moment she feels that you stopped being the man she respected and became a man who begs, who convinces, who tries to be accepted back. The tragedy isn't in the end of a relationship, it's in who you become after it. And this is where most men fail. They believe that getting her back is a matter of perfect sentences, well-timed texts, or feigning indifference. That's a cheap tactic that doesn't win her back, that repels her. Today, I'm going to show you what no one else can show you. How to get her back without making it seem like you're trying. How to be remembered even in silence. How to win her back without chasing her. But more than that, how to use this loss as fuel to become a man that neither she nor the world will be able to ignore. This video is not about her. It's about you, and about how to regain control of your presence, your energy, and your story. If you're here waiting for a magic formula to make her say, "I miss you," in the middle of the night, you can leave now. But if you want to understand why some losses are in fact the beginning of everything, then take a deep breath, because the turning point starts now. You didn't realize it when it happened, but desperation crept into your gestures. At first, it was subtle, a quick response, one more message than necessary. Then came the long audio messages, the justifications, the attempts to appear unconcerned, while inside, everything screamed. And that was when the invisible line between vulnerability and need broke. From that moment on, you stopped being the man who attracted her and became the man who begs. And that is deadly. See, neediness is not only unattractive, it's suffocating. Not because men can't feel, but because the way you express this feeling reveals something that no one wants to see, that you are not enough. And when a man is not enough, he demands it. He demands attention, response, care, presence. He demands that she validate him all the time. That's not love. That's transferring emotional responsibility. And that's tiring. It's the opposite of seduction. True vulnerability, the kind that connects, that attracts, doesn't smell like desperation. She is clean, honest, and weightless. When you say, "I miss you," and then come back into her life without asking for anything in return, that is vulnerable. But when you say, "I miss you," and then send a string of questions like, "Did you block me? Do you still think about me? Can I call you?" You have already crossed the line. What was sincere has become need. What was human has become begging. And like anything that puts pressure, it pushes. Have you ever tried to blow up a balloon too much? It bursts. The tension of emotional pressure works the same way. Women don't run away from feelings. They run away from directionless intensity, from fragility disguised as insistence, from emotional chaos that seems like affection, but is actually a ticking time bomb. And the worst part, the more you try to fix it with more words, the deeper you sink. Because each new message is more proof that you didn't understand what she is communicating with her silence. Nietzsche wrote that what we do for love always happens beyond good and evil. But the problem is that when you are in need, what you do for love is actually an act of fear. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of not being enough. And fear has no eroticism. Fear has no magnetism. Fear does not create desire. It creates pity. The irony is cruel. The more you show that you need her, the less she feels she needs you. And here comes the contradiction that few have the courage to face. It is possible to want someone, and even so decide to walk away, because what kills desire is not the absence of feeling. It is the feeling that the other person has stopped being someone who inspires us and has become someone who consumes us. If you were in her place and saw a lost man begging for crumbs of attention, would you approach or retreat? The answer is obvious and hard, but it needs to be faced with courage, because it is only when you accept that the mistake was not the loss, but the way you reacted to the loss, that you begin to free yourself from the cycle. It is not about disappearing. It is about stopping trying to fill the void with more void. Silence is not the absence of action. It is the presence of respect. And the first respect you need to regain is respect for yourself. The biggest lie you've ever told yourself is that she walked away because she found someone better looking, someone richer, someone more interesting. But the truth is infinitely more uncomfortable and more liberating. She walked away because you lost yourself trying to hold her back. The fall wasn't between you, it was inside you. And no one wants to be with someone who's in free fall. For centuries, philosophers, strategists, and seducers have studied the art of human magnetism. Robert Greene talks about the need to maintain an unshakable emotional center in order to become an irresistible figure. The man who revolves around the woman loses his power. The man who is the center of his own orbit attracts everything around him. But you've stopped being that center. You've stopped being the protagonist of your own story. You started reacting, not leading, and that changes everything. A woman doesn't need to say you've changed. She feels it. She feels it when you stop being the challenge and become the follower. When you stop looking at the world with a hunter's eye and start observing her every gesture as if your existence depended on it. And the worst part, you start living in a logic of scarcity, a mentality where she is the only source of joy, meaning, value. This is suffocating for her and for you. And this is where the brutality of reality cuts through you like a cold blade. You are not grieving for her. You are grieving for the man you no longer are, for the guy who used to be light, confident, focused, for the guy who knew she was a complement, not oxygen. You are grieving for yourself. Scarcity is not a condition. It is a choice, a mental filter where you only see what you have lost, never what you can build. And this filter contaminates everything. When you believe that she was the one, you automatically erase all other possibilities. This turns the relationship into an altar, and any altar demands a price, sacrifice. You sacrificed your dignity, your energy, your direction, all in the name of an idealization that not even she could support anymore. The craziest thing about all this, she probably still feels something. Yes, but not for the desperate man you showed her at the end, but for the echo of the man you were at the beginning, the guy who didn't need to prove anything. The guy who was so comfortable in his own skin that just by existing he made an impact. This man, and only this man, still has a chance to reconnect, not with words, but with presence. And this is where you need to make a decision. Keep trying to fix the past, or rebuild what you abandoned your essence. Because as long as you're asking for love, you won't be worthy of it. Love is a consequence, not a bargaining chip. And the man who understands this stops chasing, not because he gave up on her, but because he came back to himself. Greek tragedy teaches us that every hero falls not for lack of strength, but for excess of ego. And here's the ultimate contradiction. The ego that makes you beg is the same one that pretends you still have control. You think you're fighting for love, but you're fighting to avoid facing the abyss of your own emptiness. And love was never created to fill voids. It expands what is already whole. That's why winning her back starts with the opposite of what you were taught. It's not about proving your worth, but about remembering the worth you gave up. It's not about getting her back. It's about reconnecting with the man she loved and who you forgot to be. Want to know if she still thinks about you. Become the kind of man who's impossible to ignore, and she'll remember even if she doesn't want to. But that only happens when you stop asking yourself, what did I do wrong? And start asking yourself, who did I stop being? And perhaps the most brutal part of all this is realizing that the real abandonment wasn't hers. It was yours. And when you finally understand that the real abandonment was yours, the inevitable question arises. How do you rebuild something that was undone from within? The answer is as simple as it is challenging. You don't win someone back by chasing them. You win them back to the point where you no longer need to run. The true power lies in becoming a pole of attraction so strong that she feels your absence as a living presence. Most men think that silence is a punishment, a chastisement. But silence, when it comes from a man at peace, is magnetic because it carries an invisible narrative. I don't need to convince you of anything. And this lack of need is exactly what makes her think of you. The difference between a man who disappears out of pride and a man who withdraws out of wisdom is in the energy. One isolates himself in pain, the other in construction. When you rebuild your routine without rushing, without showing off, she feels it. You don't need to post everything, send a message or signal. You just need to live intensely. Reconnection doesn't start with a message. It starts with the silence that screams evolution. When you go back to the gym, but this time not to show results, but to reconnect with your discipline. When you go out with friends again, not to make people jealous, but because you realize that you had abandoned your social life. When you look in the mirror, and for the first time in a long time, like what you see, that's when the game changes. And here's the most contradictory part. The more you rebuild, the more she feels like coming back. And the more you depend on this coming back, the more she moves away. Because the energy of someone who needs always repels, but the energy of someone who is on a mission attracts effortlessly. A man who lives a purpose is automatically seductive because he doesn't want to convince. He invites with his very existence. You don't need to play, you need to live, and live so intensely that when she looks at your world, she asks herself, "Why did I leave this again?" The question you need to ask yourself is not, "Does he still want me?" but "Am I still part of his life?" This question is more powerful than any message with a longing emoji. Because a man on a mission doesn't beg, he walks, he creates, he transforms. And in doing so, he becomes a new universe. A universe that she may want to explore again, but this time it will have rules, limits, and self-worth. And perhaps the most curious thing of all is this. The moment she wants to come back, you may no longer want her. Because sometimes the best gift a loss brings is giving us back the most badass version of ourselves. You came here wanting answers about her, but you left with questions about yourself. And that's the real winning back. Because if you followed this journey with me this far, you already understand. Getting someone back doesn't start with messages or planned dates. It starts with the most important return of all, your return to the center of your own life. You've learned that neediness destroys, that desperation drives away, that well-placed silence screams louder than any plea for attention. More than anything, you've understood that the biggest mistake wasn't losing her. It was forgetting who you were when she fell in love. Now you have a choice. Keep waiting for signs from her, or become the sign. The man who walks with purpose, who speaks calmly, who acts with silent strength. That man attracts. That man doesn't need to chase. That man is you at your sharpest.